Hi, everybody, and welcome to Mahamudra for the People. Um, this is the 40th session, and this will be the last live session until the beginning of July, July 9th. I'll be actually starting next Friday afternoon, be in retreat for about a week, and then beginning May 1st, I'll be in retreat for 2 months. So I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank everyone for their practice. And as we've been doing up until this point, let's take a little bit of time to bring our awareness, our attention to why it is that we're here, why it is that we show up for practice. So take a moment to reflect on the preciousness of this human birth that you have. It allows for all of us to connect together in this way. It allows for us to practice Dharma. It allows for us to be able to be in relationship to other beings so that we can be of benefit, so we can assist beings as they go through life, go through the difficulties. It allows us to experience love. It allows us to experience warmth, to practice compassion, to practice patience, of course to practice Mahamudra. And this precious human birth is both glorious, quite unique, something to celebrate, and it's also quite fragile. At times we get a clear glimpse of this, moments of illness, death, loss, anxiety. And then take a moment to reflect on everything that's brought you to this moment in terms of your practice. Taking some time to perhaps focus a little on the ways that you may experience suffering, the ways that it can feel like we're being tossed and turned, thrown about by circumstance. Take a moment to remember all of spiritual friends, teachers, guides, allies who have helped provide support for you, perhaps giving you shelter spiritually. This is important because even though Western culture seems to orient us around the fact that we can go it alone and do anything alone, it's very infrequently the case that liberation can happen alone. It's always predicated on the assistance, the love, the guidance, the support, sometimes the tough love of others. And of course, taking a little bit of time to appreciate the Dharma, appreciate what a wonderful source of refuge the Dharma is. And also taking a moment to be clear about reliable and unreliable sources of Dharma. Sometimes we take refuge in things that can't possibly liberate us. Sometimes we do that because perhaps those refuges seem more convenient. Definitely more convenient than the complex work of taming our own mind. And in the practice of Mahamudra, there is a good deal of learning how to be in relationship with mind, learning how to be able to let mind arise freely. And then today, perhaps especially today, taking a little bit of time to celebrate yourself for all of this practice. It's roughly 40 weeks or so we've been doing this. This is something to celebrate, something to rejoice in. And then, as we've done in the past, silently taking refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha in the way that is resonant and meaningful for us, taking refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and the Sangha. Likewise, taking refuge in the Lama, the Yidam, the protector, taking refuge in the Lama, the Yidam, the protector, taking refuge in the Lama, the Yidam, the protector. And again, as we've done up until this point, we'll do a little bit of sitting, 12 minutes or so. Allow yourself to settle into where you are right now, settling into the seat or cushion, perhaps if you're laying in bed, bring awareness to breath, bring awareness to the experience of what arises in the mind, bring awareness to the spaciousness of mind. And using whatever anchor feels comfortable to you. This could be your breath, it could be a physical object, your field of vision, it could be a visualized object, it could be mind itself, it could be space. Allow yourself to rest into this moment, and we'll practice together like this for about 12 minutes. And slowly bring yourself back to the group. Okay. And it's nice to see everybody, even though I can't see you. And yeah, I want to see if there are any questions, and if there are any questions, go ahead and click the ask a question tab at the bottom of the page. We can also put questions in the text box. And yeah, so since I'll be off, so to speak, until July 9th, this might be a good time to ask questions if there are any. I'm also prepared to keep going with pointing at the Dharmakaya with the next instruction, which is called pointing out the mind while there are appearances. There's a question. The figure in the tanka behind me is a form of form of the Buddha, kind of this cosmic rainbow body Buddha that somebody gave me a number of years ago. And the rainbow body kind of style of painting is basically from the heart center, emanates this rainbow colored light dissolving into space. I won't be gone through July. I mean, I'll be gone until July. I'll be in retreat from May 1st until the end of June. And then I'll be picking up, I think July 4th might be the Friday before the 9th or something like that, or that weekend is the weekend before is July 4th weekend. And yeah, so this is the last Mahamudra for the people I'll be teaching until then. And so Sarah says I'm going to listen to the Friday Mahamudra for the people recordings while I'm off. Is going to just go in order. Yeah, no, I mean, just go in order. My memory of, just go in order. It's been an organic process, so, Okay, so, if it's okay, maybe I'll go on with the next instruction, which is called pointing out the mind while there are appearances. And so for those who have been following along, we've been using the text pointing out the Dharmakaya by Ninth Karmapa. And it started off with shamatha, and then into vipassana, and then with respect to vipassana, then there are these kinds of various instructions on pointing out the mind in different ways, right? So these are basically instructions on how to place the mind or rest into direct experience of mind in a number of ways and around a number of experiences of mind, rooted in the desire to understand, truly understand the experience of mind, right? So that we're not looking kind of like an intellectual or philosophical exploration of mind. We're really looking at directly experiencing mind as it arises and gaining certainty in that experience, gaining certainty in both the experience of mind and then also gaining deep familiarization with what that mind is. So continuing on with the way we've been doing this, it can be helpful to seek yourself or prepare yourself in a appropriate meditative way, and I'll share the instructions. So, allowing yourself to sit in a way that's free and easy and open. Karmapa asks us to take a look at our mind. Right? So allow yourself to bring yourself into this experience. And by looking at the mind, appearances arise. And while looking at these experiences, we often take them as objects that are brilliant, that don't cease. And that the mind that looks at these appearances arises freshly in each moment without grasping. There's no fixation of thinking the object is out there. It's just like a child looking at a shrine room. Appearance without there being an object is vivid. Appearance and mind do not differ. The natural radiance of mind appears without cessation. When appearance, not existing as separate from mind or as an external object, dawns as luminous and empty, that is the dawning of vipassana from appearance. You should know that to be the union of appearance and emptiness, the Dharmakaya. And so it could be helpful that, or helpful to just look at an object while we do this. And so before me there's a silver butter lamp. And in directly beholding the appearance of this butter lamp, I would begin to understand the experience of appearance. As Karmapa points out, in this moment, we experience this freely. There's not a tentative relationship to appearance, right? Appearance arises. Right? Appearance meaning, in this particular case, a physical object. When we're directly engaging, directly experiencing, there's not really so much a relationship of self and other, right? So when we're truly resting into the experience of appearance, appearance is just arising. Right? We're not like, oh, I'm over here, butter lamp is over there. Direct, free, open. Appearance and mind does not differ. So again, with a lot of study, with a lot of real kind of academic Dharma. We think of mind as one thing, appearance as another thing. Right? But with direct experience, we're looking at, practicing with simplicity. Butter lamp is happening. Karmapa specifically says the natural radiance of mind appears without cessation. Right? So the natural radiance of mind is the ability for appearance to arise, right? It's the ability for everything to be able to be experienced. And so this happens without cessation. It's not like, we're like, ready, 1, 2, 3, go. It just is automatic. The moment you move your glance, so there's incense burning, so I see the incense smoke. Rest into the direct experience of the incense, direct experience of floor, direct experience of shrine, direct experience of Milarepa statue. In this way, we want to let go of labeling. Oh, why is Padamapasanghi statue bigger than Milarepa statue? What does that say? What does that mean? Oh, is that bad? Is it good? Oh, if Padamapasanghi statue stood up, he'd probably be bigger than Vajrayogini. We don't need to do that. So Karmapa points out that when appearance, not existing as separate from mind or an external object, dawns as luminous and empty, that is the drawing of vipassana from appearance. A sense of relinquishment of the complexity of myself in relationship to anything. And this is a hard thing sometimes when we've spent a tremendous amount of time cultivating this, like these weird things, like vain things, like, you don't know how hard it is to have cultivated this. Right? So in this particular case, we're not even just letting the identity, the me, give room or space to arise. Right? And it's not because we don't care about ourselves, or it's definitely not because we hate ourselves. Right? It's because it's not a thing. It's not a big deal. Direct experience. And this, he says, is the dawning of vipassana from appearance. So appearance is everywhere, right? So in this room, my eldest son moved out for the first time, and now we have this room free. So it's half shrine, half office. Right? And so it was nice, shrine room. But I could go outside into, the Italian wilds of Bay Ridge, and I would be in the midst of that appearance. Sounds, buses, people. Right? And so, so often we find ourselves in this kind of very, discursive relationship to things. Oh, that bus is loud. Oh, these person's not wearing a mask. What's wrong with them? And so this isn't, this is just like letting that go. Let all the narrative. Give ourselves permission to just chill out, I was recently in North Carolina visiting in-laws and getting some time to finally get some sleep. And there were days where, I just didn't want to talk. And it's not because I was depressed. It's not because I was, Not because I was having a hard time with anyone. It's just, there's no need. Just sit, watch the sun, look at the clouds, direct experience, just letting everything go. Letting, the obsessive kind of self-orientation keep spinning its wheels, going and going and going. And don't worry, it will be there. Even when you close your eyes is appearance. The dream state is appearance. Everything is appearance. Everything. Everything that arises, perfect or imperfect, pleasurable, displeasurable, is the ground of practice. This is why reading the lives of the Mahasiddhas, their stories, to me is so meaningful, because that's what, they were all kind of radicals in the sense of, by any means necessary will I achieve liberation, right? Through by hook or by crook. So there are a couple of questions / statements. So Melissa writes, I told you that I was studying healing mantra. It was to do with purifying the elements. Since I mentioned rainbow body, where did the manifestation of outer elements stand in terms of Mahamudra? Gertrude Rinpoche once said to visualize everything as a rainbow, but in Mahamudra we don't visualize anything. Do these approaches conjoin, or are they antithetical? They're not antithetical. I can say that. So it's true that in Mahamudra we don't really visualize anything. Right? But that doesn't mean that we're not encountering the elements, right? And there's the instruction, from earlier that Ninth Karmapa offers in terms of using mind itself as the anchor, right, or as the that which we focus our awareness on, and there's this use of the elements. Right? So, very briefly put, one ends up calling to mind the element of earth with solidity, right? Structure, framing, you could say, perhaps. And that dissolves into the element of water with more movement, cool. That transforms into the element of fire. Of course, fire transforming into the element of air, air transforming into the element of space, and resting. So in a way, you could say that Mahamudra is about resting into all of the elements, letting the elements arise, letting them freely be. It's kind of pacification through just letting them be. Almost, pacification through being passive, or pacification through allowing direct experience to just experience, pacification through presence. Yeah, both in Mahamudra and then also in some forms of, Hatha Yoga as well. The work is not getting involved in too much busyness, right? And so, in some kind of capacities, the elements naturally dawn and naturally arise, and we let them dawn and we let them arise. We try not to control. So the rainbow of the elements relate to form, they relate to energy, they relate to presence. They relate to activity. Yeah, and just like our Mahamudra practice, if we get stuck in one, we're stuck. It's hard to get free. Yeah, and so walking in the park is appearance. This morning, I was at the charnel ground of Hart Island. That's appearance. It was a particularly cold morning, so that coldness was appearance of that experience. So Brett asks, so direct experience allows the object to keep its associated utility, but not elaborated story about, say, a butter lamp. But we acknowledge appearance of butter lamp. We don't deny that piece of wood is in the. We don't deny that piece of wood in room is stable. Stable. So I was using the term butter lamp to convey what I was looking at. But what if we looked at things without even labeling that? And so this is, I very much appreciate, Karmapa's point is the object is out there. It's like a child looking at a shrine room. Like a young child is looking at my shrine room will be like, what the hell? None of this makes sense. But it's shiny. It's cool. Some Buddhas are peaceful, some Buddhas are wrathful. Some are dancing, some are not. So, maybe we can begin to look at things without even spending time reflecting on or reinforcing their utility, their objectness. Using a butter lamp as a support for meditation really has nothing. I'm not propping up the butter lamp. It doesn't need me to assign existence to it. It doesn't need me to acknowledge it. Just to look. Same way, I think I've said before, my dad's a painter, and so growing up, he would take me to galleries and museums and everything, and his art is generally abstract, and as a kid, I would always ask, well, why am I what is that painting a painting of? And he'd be like, well, it's not particularly a painting. It's not an image of anything. Right? So there's an aspect of ourselves that will sometimes seek out form, right? Seek out utility, seek out, extract something from abstraction, so to speak. Right? And so the question becomes, can we just leave it as it is and relate in that way, and then relate to that experience? So to relate to abstract art directly in terms of what's being experienced, right, rather than trying to determine, all of the composite parts. So direct experience allows things to arise directly, freely. And we don't need to really worry about the rest. It took me a while to remember that butter lamp was a gift. But even then, and so then, that's just someone hammered it. No, I don't mean for us to regard our feelings as elements. Um, so the instruction that I gave, and this might, it might be a little rough just because uh, it was in the context of kind of like a graded, set of instructions. And so that instruction was about letting the mind just be free, right? Or letting our relationship, perhaps, to mind just be free, right? So in that instruction, let's see what time it is. We can all do it together. Yeah, let's do it. So take a little moment to get yourself seated. And allow yourself to take a couple deep breaths. And focus your gaze outward. And without getting too conceptual about anything, allow yourself to experience direct relationship to the element of earth. Earth, which represents solidity, stability, form, gravity. And allow the element of earth to dissolve into the element of water, which is fluid, having more energy than earth, more movement. And allow the experience of the element of water to dissolve into the element of fire, which has even more energy, more movement. And allow the element of fire to dissolve into the element of air, which is more expansive. More energy, more freedom. And allow the element of air to dissolve into the element of space. Space is vast, open, expansive. In this moment, gently fix your gaze into space. Focus yourself on no particular object. Rest into that experience. And then just bring yourself back to the moment. So, that was just one technique. So we can, if we want to, I suppose, relate to our feelings, thoughts as energy, like the four elements. And yet, it's important to get out of the mind of labeling, because kind of um, the unintended negative consequence of doing that too much is we're just like bloop, 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 labeling. Right? And so then there's a mind that's doing. Right? There's a self that's seeking. Right? It's kind of like that person who won't be quiet. They're uncomfortable with silence. Just let everything happen. Whether something has a particular form or structure isn't even really necessary to worry about so much. Are there any questions about this instruction? So Anita says, I've been experiencing the five elements as receiving different aspects of the love of the Mother Spirit. Is that a helpful metaphor to continue with? Yeah, I mean, anything that Mahamudra is not, a practice of nihilism, but it is a practice that asks us to cut to the root of mind, right? To cut to the root of experience. That being said, because of that, it's a practice that's deeply rooted in the ultimate, which is fine. But sometimes we need, the supportive form or supportive structure associated with form and a certain element of kind of, conceptual relation. So, for example, like, I think this is why Guru Yoga can be really important, right? Because it opens us up to direct experience of devotion. Right? And within the context of Mahamudra, devotion is an important thing for practitioners to engage and feel, because our heart opens up and we end up relinquishing a lot of that tightness of like self-protection, right, or constant self-resourcing. Right? But by opening up and being able to be open and experiencing directly and open and freely, whether that is the mother, whether or not the mother is arising in a kind of multi-elemental way or a singular elemental way. What's important in that moment, if that practice is something that's meaningful to us, is to be able to open up into direct experience of that. So hopefully that's helpful in the. And so Lorena asks, I wonder if you have any thoughts on how we might approach teaching with an expansive, open mind / heart. Teaching in whiteness world, direct experience is hard to maintain. Any thoughts would be most welcome. Yeah, I mean, well, one thing is, whiteness did not create the world. So there is an element of this where, that's not to minimize, obviously, the impact of whiteness, right? But as much as white people would like to think that they did create the world, they didn't create the world. And the other thing is, white people sure have created a world, right? And yet, as practitioners, I think, something that could be really important is to remember our compass, right? So the compass is really, is our inner directionality. It's just because there's all this bullshit that's created doesn't mean that bullshit has to control us. Right? And so having direct open heart can be direct open heart to what is your source of refuge, to what is, the divinity that you find direct meaning in. Right? So social work, I don't know anything about social work. I'm a chaplain, so I say that lovingly. I think what can be most helpful in what I do as a chaplain, who chaplains people who, don't share the same faith tradition almost always to me, is to lean into what is, to my experience of refuge, to my experience of direct experience, to my experience of openness. And so I can be in a space with people who do not share the same beliefs or don't even, value the beliefs I have. And that's real. I've been in situations where people have, a sense of antagonism around my being Buddhist and not believing, in God. And that's okay. I don't need, first of all, I don't need, their pity, and my showing up to be a spiritual support really doesn't have anything to do with their desire for me to be another way. And so then I rely on that which keeps my heart open so that I can be open with them. It's that I can be an open presence. Right? So that I can manifest a space that's non-judgmental, even to somebody who might be judging me, or to somebody who might be very, initially uncomfortable with somebody who might, not have a whole bunch of Christian prayers, naturally tattooed on my heart, so to speak. And so this is what I mean by the compass, is none of us can, necessarily even know the mind of another person, let alone, conform to the beliefs of another person, let alone, need to get involved in all of that. But one thing that is helpful for us is to know what keeps us able to be present in the moment. There's a lot, Mahamudra is not about us taking responsibility for the entire world. It's about moving through the entire world. People can be challenged. People are challenged by me. I'm a little bit of a, kind of the person who shakes things up at work, but that's not really me, too. These are ideas, these are kind of different forms that we inhabit. When we're able to sit in direct presence, just privately, in our own homes, for example, or our heart open in a devotional way to whatever it is, the universe, Padalamo, Vajrayogini, the Buddha, Medicine Buddha, Tara, whoever it is. All of the external thinking, all of that constant, noise has a way of melting away. And our work as practitioners asks us to kind of come back, and come back to listen to ourselves, not the external noise. It asks us to come back to our practice, session after session after session, open, free. And we need to put on various kinds of armor for different spaces that we inhabit. One of the reasons why I work where I do is because it's very challenging. And so it's challenging for me on a personal level. And it's hard, and there are aspects that suck about it. And yet I keep showing up, and I'm trying to use my work as a way to allow my practice to go a little bit deeper over time. I could get some job somewhere where everybody loves me. Everybody wants me to be around. Everybody wants to hear what I have to say. But I go to the place where people are not sure about me, or what I say runs counter to the culture, where the way I try and embody space is a way of pushing back. But I don't feel the need to ruffle feathers aggressively. I push back with presence. I push back with kindness. I push back with, the adherence to the larger kind of ethics. And so that's what I mean about the compass, is remaining focused on that which keeps you going, on the why it is that you practice. To hopefully, and the world is like, especially in the United States, this is like a horrible, violent place. There's a lot of joy in it, a lot of beauty, right? But consider the number of people who have been killed, by mass gun violence in the past 2 weeks, right? We are addicted to aggression, right? But we're also very addicted to pointing out, the faults of others, right? And so the question then becomes, okay, culturally we're addicted to aggression, and culturally we're very addicted to pointing out the faults of others. What are we going to do? How are we going to inhabit space when sometimes our existence in space is an impossibility? Right? So it's a little bit of a koan, how to be present in an impossible way. And of course, all of our refuges help. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, Buddhist Parsha can be helpful. Direct personal relationship to the deity, direct personal relationship to our teachers, direct personal relationship to everything that spiritually that nourishes us, Buddhist and non-Buddhist. As social workers, or anybody who's in a helping profession, if you don't have a connection to your, or a teacher, right, school teacher, an inner source of refuge, there's a very high likelihood that you're going to burn out and lose a certain sense of efficacy and resilience, and ability to cope with everything that gets thrown your way. And so in that way, it's helpful, because I've met I've met social workers, I've met chaplains, I've met therapists, I've met, doctors, I've met all sorts of people who are burned out, and it's very evident. Right? They don't have the ability to be fully present. They don't have the ability to not let themselves kind of fall into some kind of, reactive relationship to what's happening. So it's vital. Um, one of my problems, like, on a personal level, is like I will find myself getting carried away with everything that needs to be done, and then I don't sleep. And when I don't sleep, then I become more tired, and as I become more tired, it becomes easy to kind of, lose that focus on really the kind of real, like, core spark, that really ignites my spiritual practice. And it's not that I lose it, but it's just, it's harder to focus when I'm exhausted. And so coming back to that is what helps. Relaxing, slowing down, and coming back. And I hear quite frequently that people feel guilty about relaxing, but if we can't learn to care for this, because we are, vehicles for the spark. We are vehicles for Mahamudra practice. We're vehicles for Bodhisattva practice. We're vehicles for the benefit of beings. It's not that we are workhorses, but we need to care for ourselves. And there was an instruction I shared, I can't remember. I guess it was recently at some point, I think a teaching on Minjo that I gave about, allowing our practice to be beautiful and an expression of beauty. All too often, it's my slight critique of social justice movements, is people put their boots on and they go to battle. And I understand that, and I understand, the energy behind that and the force, right? But I'm also curious why people don't put their boots on and go to art. People don't put their boots on and go to transform in that way. Right? And so, again, this kind of like, putting our boots on to go battle is a very indicative statement of our, related to our culture, related to the relationship that we have with things, where I'm going to go, eviscerate my enemy. Right? But we are form, right? And our form is beauty. Our voice is beauty. The air we inhale and exhale is beauty. The heart that beats in our chest is beauty. The blood that courses through our veins is beauty. All of the neural energy that courses through the neural pathways is beauty. Our hormonal systems is beauty. It's all art. So can we inhabit space that way? Rather than coming back to this very binary, self versus other, us versus them, triggered, constantly triggered. And when we notice when we're triggered, what are we feeling in our body? Feeling a tremendous amount of adrenaline, cortisol, and all of that stuff. And too much of that is not good. So in inhabiting space, how can we do that with wisdom that allows us to be able to benefit ourselves as we do this? So anyway, hopefully that's helpful, Marina. So pain rates, what do you do if the experience of space is just so open for you that it brings you to tears? Practice in private so the neighbors don't ask what's going wrong. Breathe out and rest back into it and let the bliss waves come and go. So there's nothing wrong with being moved to tears in practice. We just want to be able to do it in a way that doesn't bring unwanted attention. The bliss is interesting because it feels incredible, right? It's amazing, and natural and free, right? Um, and yet it's so easy to kind of get hooked on that. But as for the openness, what happens if we just, just be with it? We, again, find ourselves in a culture where we're really trained to think we're imperfect. We're trained to believe that the world is imperfect, that appearance is imperfect, that our relationship to all of these things is convoluted, somehow not naturally perfect. But when we're able to let things just arise naturally, freely, openly, right, in that bhakti kind of way, this kind of bhakti Mahamudra, so to speak, it's incredible. Maybe people need to see us crying because of how beautiful practice is, how beautiful appearance is. Even in these strange moments where, we're in the midst of an environmental crisis, and who knows what's going on with COVID, maybe we're in the beginning of a fourth wave, all of this stuff, all of that brokenness, right? In the middle of samsara, how could there be beauty? Maybe there is. Right? Or everything sucks, is imperfect. And of course, it doesn't have to be that binary either. Right? But we can be pretty guarded, at least as Americans. There are folks here who are not American, maybe they're more lucky. I don't know. But we're so tight in ourselves. Our energetic body is tight and all messed up. Our breathing is tight and messed up. Our relationship to time is tight and messed up. Our relationship to sleep is tight and messed up. And capitalism has turned our bodies, both physical and energetic, into a very kind of deformed kind of thing. Right, so what happens when we just open up and really counter that, right? What does Mahamudra have to do with showing up for work? What does work have to do with showing up for Mahamudra? Time frames, time sheets, schedules. Again, this is why coming back to the Mahasiddhas is so helpful for me, at least, is to see these examples of none of these people clocked in. None of these people were worried about all that stuff. Yeah, so Lorena asks a question, and I do want to address this. And don't be sorry about asking questions. Um, and I'm not going to skip it. But yeah, so, Lorena expressed some nervousness about getting the vaccine tomorrow because of inflammation that it might cause and that they may have in their body. What to do? We're living in a fear bubble with COVID. So they don't want to live in fear. And I get that. I was out of town on Saturday. This actually Saturday through Wednesday afternoon, early evening, and with my family. And Saturday, I get a phone call that somebody at work died of COVID, and they were quarantining with their partner, who then that evening had to be hospitalized because of COVID. And today I was on the phone with somebody at work who had to be hospitalized with COVID. And I understand, yesterday I was talking to some folks who are part of the team I'm on, and I'm the only person in my, the people who work in the division that I run that respond to staff in crisis. I'm the only person who's been vaccinated. Everybody else doesn't trust the vaccine. They don't, there's fear, there's anxiety, and I get that, and it's complicated. And when you look at the deaths, populations that have disproportionately been affected by COVID, it's mostly people of color. And there's a really powerful article I read last week reaffirming that in New York City at least, the majority of people who have died of COVID are people of color. And so obviously, on one level, we can only make the decision that feels appropriate for us, right? Both in terms of our body and then our relationship to kind of large pharma world. At the same time, New York City appears to be in the midst of a spike that's quite bad. We have I think it's now talking about 3 variants here in the city. The Brazilian variant, the British variant, and perhaps even a New York City variant. I wouldn't worry so much about oneself doing, being motivated from the perspective of well, if I don't get vaccinated, I'm just part of the problem, because I don't think that's helpful. But if vaccination helps with overall physical health and living in a time when it's very uncertain, where this is still going to go. It looks like things are getting better, and I hope they do continue to get better. Yeah, I get your point, Lorena, and I agree. And if we're living with COVID for an undetermined amount of time in our country, then that's another thing to consider as well, right? That risk then becomes a risk that can turn into a risk that might last years. And do you want to have to go through that? I can't tell anyone what to do. It's not my job, thankfully. But do what feels right for you and your body. Yeah. The only thing that I've heard about bad reactions is that to Moderna at least is that some people have said that if you've had COVID in the past and then you take the vaccine, then the reaction is a bit stronger. My reaction was a little strong, but I had COVID reasonably. I mean, I wasn't hospitalized, but it was pretty bad. And I found myself actually, it'll be a year ago next week that I got it. And even just the memory is uncomfortable. Makes me feel kind of uncomfortable. So, take the time you need. It is hard to trust big pharma. And also, though, as of today, I will have blessed 2,198 bodies of people who died of COVID. And so it's real. It's a real risk that's still. I was talking to the driver, who drives the morgue truck, who was telling me that, the bodies still keep coming. So, but anyway, that's 3:23. There's not enough time to do the next instruction, but there is time for maybe another question. If anybody has one. Oh, thank you, Lorena. Travis writes, wondering about being a yogi who clocks in. It doesn't seem like quitting jobs is the answer for me now, but it's an ongoing conundrum / frustration for me. Thinking about it also in terms of no preference view and the shoe cobbler Mahasutta. It is a matter of perspective, I think. Everything that we experience, we can practice with in the moment. The all appearance, easy and hard, painful appearance and easy appearance. I think a little bit sometimes about the binary in that kind of question, and not because I think you're asking a binary question necessarily, but it's an issue one kind of gets into where it's like, oh man, if I didn't have all this stuff like to do, I could practice all the time, right? But then what's preventing one from practicing going to work, practicing anywhere, right? And why does practice always have to be formal practice? What do you need to, what point do you need to get to practice like that? And that's not a question I can answer for anybody, because we all need to answer for ourselves. But if you look at at least the kind of common narrative around Tilopa, he is doing all sorts of weird things and practicing. Or if we look at others, Maitreya is a really good example of academic monk goes to meet a freaky yogi, does retreat with the freaky yogi, has experience, and then the freaky yogi sends him back to the monastic university. Everything, even our own irritability, is our practice. Our need to disengage is our practice. Our fear and aggression is our practice. And sometimes it feels a lot different when we sit down and do formal practice because sometimes those things don't show up in the same quantity. Going back to the work I've done on Heart Island, there's so many that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't working. And that is so painful to think about, too, all of that death. I was a little overwhelmed by it last week. But it's helpful for me to get overwhelmed because it reminds me that I'm alive, and that I'm connected to the world, and that there's a world there that needs support, and that we, just as in the Mahamudra, in the Lindra, sadhana with the Bodhisattva vow, we're vowing to show up, to show up, to show up, to show up, and keep showing up. So there's benefit sometimes in showing up to work, showing up to bring benefit in these situations that we could be tired of. This has been a COVID year, so I think it's safe to say that we're all pretty kind of worn out, right? And that's okay. That's normal. That's natural. So Anika's question, 101 question. Mind is awareness and awareness is emptiness. So this play of form unfolding before me, the form I need to stop labeling conceptually, is all occurring in mind as awareness. This is the oneness of it all, emptiness, form, mind, awareness. In a sense, yes. But it's 3:30, so I think the ringing bell of the classroom saved me from having to answer your hard question. But seriously, labeling and conceptualizing in and of itself is not bad. But when we get into this habit of labeling and conceptualizing, and I say it's not all bad because, right, you can't build a bridge without labeling your concepts, right? You can't, you can't design a machine to help recycle more effectively. You can't plan environmentally sound buildings without, labeling. And so in and of itself, it's not bad, right? But when it draws us, labeling and conceptualization draws us away from direct experience of the way everything arises and direct experience of mind, because we kind of get caught in just like, it's kind of like the subtle background noise of, this kind of conceptual relationship to the world, or that's all we see things through, this kind of lens of binary, self and other, good and bad, etc. It's not to say that, bad doesn't exist. It's not to say good doesn't exist. But when we're just constantly in that reactive mode, that is a form of inflammation, so to speak. Being inflamed, being, mildly agitated in that way. Right? And so, so we try to settle into the practice of Mahamudra to be able to experience mind and awareness, and ultimately the kind of experience of unity. So that's kind of like a very kind of short, and imperfect answer. But if you save it, we can discuss it in July. So I want to thank everyone for all of your lovely questions and for your practice and for your dedication. This is such a lovely experience, and Mahamudra for the people has been a real joy. I pray that the protectors move with all of you, removing obstacles, blessing you with good health, blessing you with freedom from obstacles and practice. May your practice be deep, may it be strong, may it be profound. May you continue to tread the path in such a way that invites beings who are both friends as well as beings who may be challenging onto the path with you. May your heart remain open, and may blessings rain down on every single one of you and your families and your circle of support. And may you have everything you need, and we'll pick this up in July. Until then, take good care and go with my love.